Good afternoon. I have the wonderful opportunity to share with all of you today my experiences and relationships working with two other internal coaches as part of the Patent Autism Initiative. At the beginning of this past school year, the three of us started working together to share resources, and today we will share our story of connecting and collaborating as internal coaches from three different school districts across Lancaster, Dauphin, and Lebanon County in Pennsylvania. One thing we realized when we started working together and getting to know each other is that our roles as internal coaches in our programs are very different, and also the number of classrooms and staff and students. We also realized our school districts were very different in settings and demographics. The first person I worked with was Audrey Banzhaf, who is the internal coach from the school district of Lancaster in Lancaster County. I also worked with Heather Matlock, who is the internal coach from Harrisburg School District in Dauphin County. And I am Robin Ann Kimmey from the Eastern Lebanon County School District, better known as ELCO, in Lebanon County. To start off today, we will be reviewing our objectives and letting you know who will be presenting the different topics on connecting and collaborating. Our first objective is that participants will define the role of the internal coach, including how supports from the internal coach are implemented in school districts. This will be presented by myself, and I also will be outlining the responsibilities of the internal coach as presented by the Patent Autism Initiative Guidelines for consultation. Our second objective that will be presented by Audrey is that participants will outline how their program can successfully implement new routines for effective collaboration in your program. And she will also be presenting ideas for effective collaboration. Objective 3, which will also be presented by Audrey, is that participants will list methods to successfully communicate and collaborate with staff in their program and colleagues outside of their program and school district. And Audrey will also provide ideas for successful communication and collaboration. And our fourth objective will be presented by Heather. Participants will identify professional development delivery improvements in their program, including implementing effective collaboration strategies with colleagues between school districts. Heather will also be presenting ideas and strategies from her program. So I'm Robin Ann Kimmey. I'm from the Eastern Lebanon County School District. I'll start today with some information about myself and my school district. I have been working with students in autism support programs in New Jersey and Pennsylvania for the past 23 years. I have been working at ELCO for the past 10 years. I am currently working as the special education consultant for specialized programs at ELCO. This is a new position, and I will be the special education consultant for our autism support program, our emotional support program, and our life skills program. Our special education department is growing at ELCO, and I am honored to be part of the team during this exciting transition. Our autism support classrooms are also all part of the Patent Autism Initiative. ELCO School District is located in a rural section of Myerstown. We have 5 school buildings, with 3 of them being on a main campus in Myerstown and 2 smaller elementary schools out towards the edges of the county. We are excited to have 2 amazing consultants from Patent that have been working with us for the past 3 years. They are Willa Hazilla and Lindsay Nans. In Lebanon County, we are also very fortunate to have the services of the Intermediate Unit 13, which serves Lebanon and Lancaster County. We also work with ATTAC, a training and consultant team member from IU 13, who is Melissa Walsh. Up until this summer, ELCO has had 2 autism support classrooms, a K-2 room at our elementary school and a 3rd to 5th grade classroom in our intermediate school. We are in the process this summer of opening 2 new classrooms, an additional K-2 classroom, which will be in the elementary school located next to our current K-2 autism support room. And we are also opening our first 6th to 8th grade classroom in our middle school. As you can see by this graph of facts about our school, our district is not culturally diverse. The green part of the pie is almost 92% one demographic. Our student groups represented indicated that economically disadvantaged students are at about 38%, about 1% are English language learners, and we have 2% of our students designated as homeless. This chart represents our district special education data. As you can see, we have approximately 2,300 students in total in our district. 434 of them receive special education services, or about 18% of the district total. Students in district are receiving services under the disability categories of autism, about 12% of special education students, emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, OHI or other health impairment, specific learning disability, and speech and language impairment. What exactly is an internal coach? And what qualities should a good internal coach possess? Since Mike first requested the 3 of us present here today on our experiences as coaches connecting and collaborating, I started a list of qualities needed to be an effective internal coach. I created this wordle to highlight the qualities and traits such as educating, training, supporting, giving feedback, giving guidance, communicating, energizing, and being inspiring. I will go over a few of these important qualities in detail now. Listen. A good internal coach will not only listen to the words a staff member is saying, including their thoughts and ideas, but will also pay attention to their expressions and emotions. They will pay attention to body language and interactions with other staff and students. A good internal coach will also learn by listening and observing what motivates the staff member. Listening can strengthen relationships, improve and build trust, improve teamwork, and show staff that you care. Encourage and inspire. After I started collaborating with Audrey and Heather, I realized how important this quality is as an internal coach because I was so encouraged and inspired by collaborating with both of them. This year, we faced many obstacles and uncertainties with COVID tests, social distancing, plexiglass partitions, wearing masks, substitutes, and extended student and staff absences. And it made me realize the importance of encouraging and inspiring staff to keep a positive and enthusiastic atmosphere in the classroom. Listening along with encouragement builds confidence in staff members and can make staff feel they are a valuable part of the program. Train and educate. The collaboration between the 3 of us started by sharing resources with each other. A good internal coach also never stops learning themselves, so they can always be a resource to train and educate the staff in their program. Energize. This question was asked at the most recent boot camp I attended a few weeks ago in Harrisburg. Someone raised their hand and asked Mike and Willow, how do they always have all the energy we see at boot camp? And how do you get your staff to show that energy in the classroom? I realized during this discussion that energizing the staff in the program is a huge responsibility of the internal coach. In a classroom recently, when a student exceeded their goal during an activity, the classroom spontaneously erupted in celebration, very energized, including staff and other students. And this is the kind of energy that we want to see in our classrooms. Collaboration is what brought the three of us here today. Audrey will be presenting more information and examples of collaboration in her part of the presentation. So what are the advantages of an internal coach? Similar goals. Utilizing an internal coach in the classroom has the advantage that is it a person that from within the school district. The internal coach will have similar goals for the autism support program as the teachers, administration, and support staff in the program. Some of these goals may include district goals, such as ELCO Together. ELCO Together, one community, one school district, creating learning opportunities for each student every day. Another advantage is building mutual trust and respect. The internal coach provides opportunities to work closely with team members and get to know them well while building and demonstrating a foundation of mutual trust and respect. They can work together on moving past obstacles and support development of opportunities to make changes for students to succeed. Another advantage is empowerment. Trust and honesty grows and develops from successful coaching and feedback to create a feeling of empowerment. Empowerment of staff provides opportunity and means for employees to explore their best course of action and implement it. Developing trust and honesty. And it is very important in your classrooms to build a culture that wants and accepts feedback. This empowers decision-making and action and empowers the creation of action plans to address problems. Positive student progress. An atmosphere of empowerment allows individuals to be creative and intuitive when problem solving to achieve student success. And then learning becomes a way of life in the classroom. Learning for staff becomes a way of life as staff actively seek feedback and support. I would now like to review the responsibilities of an internal coach in the classrooms that are part of the Patent Autism Initiative. These guidelines can be found in the Patent resource file under consultation as listed as the responsibilities of an internal coach. To observe, provide feedback, modeling, and guided practice for items listed on the site review. Since one of our two classrooms that are existing now had new staff this year and also had staff start in the classroom late in the school year, I developed a list of responsibilities with assistance from both of my teachers for our specialized paraprofessionals in the classroom. These responsibilities outline their duties before students arrive, during the day when students are present, and after the students leave each day. The example provided shows the responsibilities of the specialized paraprofessionals before the students arrive each day, including preparing reinforcers, making sure data sheets are good to go for the day, cards and all materials are prepared and ready, and the materials and cold probe sheets are prepared. These responsibilities will be utilized as daily checklists for the upcoming school year for the new classrooms and all the existing classrooms. Also, in our program at ELCO, since we only have two classrooms, I am able to spend time myself in classrooms during the day training staff. My focus this past school year was in our 3rd to 5th grade classroom, which has had all new staff and a new teacher, including additional staff hired after the school year began. This is an example of a specialized paraprofessional I have been working with late in the school year. She was becoming fluent at several intensive teaching procedures such as errorless teaching and error correction, but was struggling at reinforcement, delivering reinforcement, and understanding the variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. So we did several transcriptions and also used the fidelity checklist to focus on her skills that needed improvement. I just have an example here, but through continually modeling by myself and other staff, she practiced and she is improving her VR and delivery of reinforcement. As you can see on the bottom of the sheet, in April, she started at like a 25, down to a 22, down to a VR of 17, and just recently has a VR of 10 for a student of a VR of 8. And she kept going and kept trying till she was fluent in doing the VR. This specialized paraprofessional was also attending boot camp a few weeks ago. To reinforce teacher and staff behaviors and support their efforts when and where appropriate. I have learned over the years the importance of having the classroom come together as teams to boot camp. So reinforcing staff and teacher behavior starts at the Patton Boot Camp. During checkouts, teams come together to encourage each other, be nervous together, laugh together, and celebrate together. Boot camp can lay the groundwork for successful teams during the school year. I've had the opportunity of attending boot camp 4 times over the years with new classroom teams and team members. The internal coach is also a member of the team, and I feel when I attend boot camp with staff members, it shows that staff are important and valuable team members and that I am a caring and supportive coach. Due to several changes in support staff this year and also erratic schedules and schedule changes due to COVID, we needed to implement some team building activities to bring staff together, to get to know each other better instead of just passing each other in transitions or needing to come together for a student in crisis. My immediate school teacher, Mrs. Lutz, developed this team building scavenger hunt, and it was very successful. We actually asked for extra time for staff to complete the activity one morning. It focused on looking at different areas of the school community where each staff member works during the day, but they are usually never in the area together. As you can see on the scavenger hunt, we focused on things like the sensory path that was upstairs. Staff members had to count how many pieces there were and then provide a video of a team member completing the sensory path. We also had them working on identifying behaviors together, using a blank cold probe sheet to develop a program for a student. And one of the funnest activities were how many pieces of playground equipment does the school have? And they had to take a video of a staff member going down the slide. And then we had some fun things as Mrs. Kimmey's favorite color and the name of the teacher's 3 dogs. That scavenger hunt also was just provided during a routine day in May. So our next responsibility is to provide resource reference material to support ABA VB concepts or other items listed on the site review. These can be found on the ABA VB resource files provided by the Autism Initiative. So what I have done for my classrooms is I've created a Google Classroom for teachers to access information more easily. This works by just clicking on a link and it takes you to a Google file containing all the information. This one for the teachers contains consultant notes, student meeting notes, team notes, and information on updated protocols. I also have one that's designed for the support staff also. This one has more training information, as this is an example of an area that one classroom struggled with fluency in listener response skills. And we practiced during several staff meetings and developed this listener response tip sheet to help out. I also have on the support staff access to my lending library. This is an example of my library that I have posted on important books such as those shown in the slide. I wrote out descriptions to help people select a book that may be of interest to them. I have a problem with books also in that I want to own every book I see. So I have a really good selection in my personal library for staff members to borrow. The next responsibility is to provide group training opportunities when possible in coordination with the consultant where appropriate. Myself and my two teachers also developed our own ELCO boot camp. This part one focused on understanding autism spectrum disorder. Many of the specialized paraprofessionals we hire may have a limited understanding of ASD. The benefit of presenting this information just to staff in our program is we can individualize the information about specific students so the staff can better understand the students they are working with every day. These are some of the objectives we focused on in this part of the boot camp. I also show several videos embedded in this presentation to celebrate and highlight abilities of students and adults with ASD. Part two of our boot camp focuses on verbal behavior and classroom protocols. We do show several of the patent videos modeling and demonstrating procedures and principles of ABA. Also, as part of our boot camp, presenting this information within our district also gives us the opportunity to individualize the procedure specific to our program and classroom. These ELCO boot camps are also beneficial to team building and staff getting to know each other better. For the past 2 years, I was also the district behavior specialist at ELCO. I was asked to present to all special education staff about completing an FBA and positive behavior support plan. As part of that presentation, I also presented on the principles of behavior and the functions of behavior. I have updated the presentation and use it now for new staff training in the autism support program. Just as the boot camp, we can individualize the instruction and analyze and reflect on student behavior in the classroom setting and program, and also discuss why the person themselves behave. Our program also had the opportunity for a virtual training this past winter with our two patent consultants, Willa Hozilla and Lindsay Nans. This training focused on staff members that were new to the program this past school year. We will also have an amazing opportunity to have a team from Patent and from IU13 come to our district in August to help us set up our new middle school classroom. This will be the first autism support classroom in the middle school. So this will be an exciting learning and team building opportunity here at ELCO. Our next responsibility is to communicate with the patent consultants on a regular basis about progress in the classroom. As I mentioned before, we also work closely with our IU13 TAC and our patent consultants together. All communication is always sent to all three of them. We also frequently link them through Google Drive to information related to our program. One task as a coach that I started about 2 years ago was to send an agenda of the topics we would like to discuss during consultation. I send the agenda out the week before the consultation. And the list is also an active document on our Google Drive, and the teachers add topics as needed throughout the month. I know once a consultant questioned about an upcoming consultation date and shared that it was probably the wrong date because they had not received an agenda from me that week. This is an example of agenda that was sent out this March, and it lists the different classrooms. And also I put, if there's information that I'd like to talk with individually with the consultants, I also list that on the bottom. Our next responsibility is to guide, support, and facilitate the recommendations in the consultation summary notes, which are based on ABA-VB concepts and the site review. Classrooms with new staff members meet once a week to discuss procedures, answer questions, and share information shared by the consultants. The internal coach always attends this meeting. For the more established classrooms, the teacher runs most of the staff meetings and has 2 to 3 meetings a month based on the information needed to provide to the staff. Staff meeting notes and agendas and PowerPoints are also saved and available for reference to all staff members in the future. This is an example of topics that we discussed at staff meetings. And if it is a topic at a staff meeting, we have probably just discussed it with consultants and they provided additional information to share to help with our program. Another method I use to share information from the consultants with our staff is to videotape them videotape the consultants during their visits and share these videos with the staff. I will often videotape the consultant modeling procedures while working with students. And this information is very helpful and will often answer many questions that may arise from staff members when I am teaching and modeling the skills. Also during COVID and virtual consultation, I was taping procedures that consultants were explaining that might have been a little complicated, and also references that the consultants were making when working with staff virtually. These videos are also all uploaded into the Google Classroom for all staff to access at any time. To provide a clear distinction between one's duties as the internal coach and one's duties as a district or other employee when making recommendations. So before I explain a little bit about this, I wanted to give you a background on my other positions I've held in the district while being an internal coach. The first year, I was the district itinerant autism support teacher. The second year, I was the district behavior specialist, and into the third year, I was also the district behavior specialist. And now currently I am in the new position of the special education consultant, along with being the internal coach of the autism support program. I feel that having the position as district itinerant autism support teacher and the district behavior specialist has been an asset for my position as the internal coach. The skill set for these positions is very similar, and the qualities needed for these positions is also similar, such as educating and training staff, encouraging and inspiring staff, and also energizing staff and students. With each successive position, I have been moving further away from working directly with students and families to working more with staff. Working and educating and inspiring and energizing staff will also be a large part of my current position as the special education consultant. And I also wanted to add that my biggest challenge in being an internal coach with these other positions has not been a conflict of interest or duties. It's been about managing and delegating my time to fulfill all the needs in the different positions. I have learned that I need to have a very accurate schedule, and I need to follow that schedule, communicate often with staff, and be very flexible, and also be very timely about making up anything that was missed due to be calling away from one position to fulfill my duties in another position. To attend trainings that will allow further development of skills related to implementation of effective instructional practices. As stated before, I attend the Patent Boot Camp wherever possible to support new staff members and classroom teams. I have attended 4 times when new staff attend to start with team collaboration. The National Autism Conference is also where all the rock stars of autism and ABA have presentations on current trends and findings in autism and ABA. It is the only place to be. We have an amazing intermediate unit that provides training on many topics, including a para academy each year for our paraprofessionals. IU13 is always in communication with the districts they serve and present trainings that are relevant to the needs of their districts. I also belong to an internal coach group based in IU13 and run by Melissa Walsh. We have been meeting frequently as a group by Zoom to share resources and collaborate. We also have an extensive resource file we all share and make contributions to. The intermediate unit also has a behavior specialist network. When we gather for a meeting, we frequently have members present on current topics of interest, and we also have a Schoology page to share resources among the members. And of course, the ultimate responsibility of all internal coaches is to eventually acquire a skill set similar to that of Patent Autism Initiative consultants, so that your school district or program can independently maintain provision of an ABA supports, as well as to support dissemination of evidence-based practices. And we are all working to make progress towards that goal. As the 3 of us started collaborating together this year, I learned that I have grown myself as a coach and as a collaborator. Specifically, many of the internal coach traits and qualities I spoke about became stronger for me, such as encouraging and inspiring my classroom and focusing on the positive aspects of the students, the staff, and the program. Through collaboration with Audrey and Heather, I gained confidence in my abilities and increased my learning through their positive feedback and support. So to wrap up, I'm going to review some coaching tips to always remember. Remember to collaborate instead of control. Remember to ask more questions and give fewer demands. Remember to always respect confidentiality. And feedback. Always give supportive, specific feedback instead of making judgments. Listen more and talk less. And one of the most important aspects I feel I've learned over the years is celebrate and communicate success. Positive successes should be frequently shared with families and administration. Let the school know what is going on in your program. Invite administration from your building and the district to see your program. Proudly share and communicate information about your program and make sure your students and staff actively participate in building activities and district programs. I would like to thank the following people that are always there to help and support our program. Our two patent consultants, Willow Hazilla and Lindsay Nans, and of course our IU13 TAC, Melissa Walsh, and as always, Mike. I would also like to thank our wonderful autism support teachers at ALCO, our specialized paraprofessionals, and our support staff. I want to thank our ALCO administration for their continued support of our growing and expanding autism support program. I have listed here my contact information and my email. If there's anything that you would like copies of, I would be more than happy to share information with any of you. Thank you very much. And now Audrey will talk about effective collaboration.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this section of our session this afternoon, where we are going to talk a great deal about what is collaboration. How do we collaborate? What are some tips and tricks in order to effectively collaborate within the team that we are in? So in this section, we will talk about objective 2, which again is outlining different ways to successfully implement routines for effective collaboration, as well as objective 3, where we will talk about methods, ways to go about establishing collaboration within your program, and also possibly outside of your program or outside of your district, if that's appropriate for you. A brief introduction to the School District of Lancaster, which is where I work. My name is Audrey Banzhaf, and I come to you from the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I work as the behavior specialist for autistic support / the internal coach for the School District of Lancaster. I have served in this role for the past 6 years. And in my 6 years, the program has doubled in size from my first day to now. So with that, of course, it has led to so many different opportunities for collaborating with many different staff that work in the classrooms, as well as collaborating to problem solve for different student needs that have come up in the classroom. The reason I'm just going to share a little bit about my district is when Robin Ann, Heather, and I were connecting about these presentations, we were talking about how we like to have the background information on the presenter when we are the attendees, just because it helps paint a little bit of a picture as to where the presenter is coming from, their history with working with students with autism, or whatever it might be, that why they're sharing the information that they're sharing. So I will just touch very briefly on my district just to give you a little bit of background information. The School District of Lancaster is a large urban district with 13 autistic support classrooms that are supported by the internal coach. So just in comparison with Robin Ann's, I know that we, as the School District of Lancaster, are substantially larger than Robin Ann's district. And we are a large urban district, which is again different from ELCO as well. These 13 different classrooms, just again to give you some content, is 2 high school classrooms, 1 middle school classroom, and then 10 elementary school classrooms. Of course, this will change as the students grow and move through the programs. As we get new students coming in, that will shift, but that is where we are at now. Some background on the School District of Lancaster. We are very culturally diverse, as you can see here. And another thing I like to keep in mind too is that our families of our students speak over 70 different native languages in the homes. And it's just something I like to keep in mind when we are working towards supporting different students and different families. How we want to keep that in mind for when we're working to support them, to make sure that we're meeting the needs as best as possible. Our total enrollment in the School District of Lancaster is just over 10,000, which in comparison to Robin Ann's, it's about 4 times the size total population. And then of that population, about 20% of the students do receive some support in special education services. And about half, a little over half of that population does fall under the autism category. So just a little bit of background information about the school district. Before we get into how to establish effective collaboration efforts across the school districts or within your school district, we first need to talk about what actually is collaboration. Collaboration is a commonly used word, but it can be easily associated with other words as well. In my opinion, we don't want to throw around the word collaboration as some sort of fancy buzzword to label something and let that be that. We really want to have an understanding of what collaboration is. That being said, when you look up synonyms for collaboration, the list is pretty endless, including teamwork, partnership, association, and cooperation. And then when you look at those words, if you were to look at cooperation, there's many synonyms for those words as well. You can imagine the list just goes on and on when you're looking at how to define one word with another word. And this can lead us to a repeating cycle of words that just can all jumble together when you're done with it. Rather, we want to look at not to describe collaboration by defining it, but rather the key components that make collaboration work. That being said, we do want to look at the actual definition of collaboration, which is the action of working with someone to produce or create something. So as the result of collaboration, something is produced as a final result. Daily, we are constantly exposed to the final products, that something that is established, that is produced as a result of people collaborating. We're not typically privy to the processes that the teams went through to establish the effective collaboration, but we typically just see that end result, that product, that final result, that's something that is produced. However, collaboration happens all the time. And as a result, great things are produced and shared in society. So for some example, Aerosmith and Run DMC created Walk This Way. The Avengers worked together to defeat Thanos. Elton John and George Michael worked together to create Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, another tangible something that was produced. Peanut butter and chocolate came together to create a delicious dessert treat. Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet worked together to create Titanic. And lastly, Queen and David Bowie came together to create the song Under Pressure. These are just some simple, easy examples that are the end result of collaboration processes. We don't know the full process that these teams went through, but we do know that these different teams worked together to create something. And that something benefited groups of people in one way or another. So, but back to why we are here, we know that we know what can be achieved as a result of the collaboration processes. Something is achieved, something is created, but it might not be clear as to how that collaboration was established to actually be effective. There are a few key components to collaborating in education to making it successful, and that's what we'll go over now. Those key components are common goals, joint work and interdependence, parity, and voluntary participation. The first one that we'll go over is common goals. Common goals benefit themselves, each other, and the big picture. So if I were collaborating with somebody as part of a team and we were creating common goals, those goals might benefit me directly, and we're all working together to benefit me. We might all be working together to benefit all of us as a whole, as a team, or we might be working together to benefit the big picture, whether it be the program that we're working in, the school district that we are in, the community that we are in, the students' families, so on. So it can benefit a variety of different categories of groups of people, but it is something that we are all working on together. It is a common goal. We all are aware of the goal, and it is shared among all team members. Second, and this is an important component, because in order for collaboration efforts to be effective, the common and shared goals need to be self-generated. Of course, there are times where teams will come together to work on an assigned project with an assigned outcome, and that is extremely important as well. There is absolute a need for that. But when looking at collaborating to become better, more effective educators, more effective teachers, paraprofessionals, related service providers, internal coaches, administrators, so on. Having the goals be self-generated will allow for creative opportunities, which we will touch on a little bit later. The next goal, or the next common, the key component that we will talk about is joint work and interdependence. Interdependence is defined as the dependent of two or more things on each other. This means that interdependence as a key component of collaboration means that the work cannot be completed without working together. There is a dependence on one another to achieve the set outcome, to achieve that common goal. And from collaborating together, that is how it will be achieved. In other words, if the participants did not work together, if they did not collaborate, then the goals of collaborating would not be achieved. Those common goals would not be met. The next key component that we will talk about here is parity. And parity is another buzzword that we might throw around and say, yep, we've achieved parity. But in reality, when we are talking about parity, we are talking about equality among the team members that are in the collaboration team. All members must believe that they are an equal member and have something to contribute, which will assist with members actually contributing. And nothing in collaboration is a part of a competition. During one of our last meetings about this session here, Heather, Robin, Ann, and I had a conversation about this word competition. Never do any one of us want to be the best member of the team, the best member of that internal coach team, the best member of the team at our school district. Rather, we all want to work to be our best and then bring out the best in each other. That is that true piece, that nobody is better than one another in this collaboration team. We are all in it as equals, and we all have equal things to contribute. If we do that, if we work together, if we strive to be the best for ourselves and the best for each other and bring out the best in each other, then the team benefits individually as a whole, and the community will benefit as well. When collaborating, it's important for us to all work together as peers and as colleagues. To go along with that, with all members being equal, all members also share the knowledge and the power during the process as well. So all members have an equal opportunity to share their knowledge, to share the power, to lead the conversation, to be a participant in the conversation. All members have the option to share the knowledge that they have in an effort towards the final product of collaboration. So in plain terms, nobody is sitting passively by in this collaboration effort. All have equal opportunities to participate in the collaboration approaches. So one thing when we were pulling together this information, Robin, Ann, Heather, and I were talking about, as individual points came up, we said, oh, if we didn't do it this way, that would be really detrimental to the whole collaboration process. Or before we were working on our presentation, oh, if we didn't have this set up here, it would be that much harder to do this, and here's why. So throughout my section here, I will take a couple moments to pause and say, how, if we didn't do it this way, might it be harmful to our process? So when you think about if we didn't incorporate parity into the collaboration efforts, how might that be harmful? If we didn't ensure that all members of the team were equals, there might be fear in feeling the need to impress the assumed leader at all times. There might be fear in speaking up. They might, if people are not feeling as equals, they might be cautious in making what could be considered a mistake. So then that would lead them to not actively participate in the collaboration approaches. We feel more comfortable, or hopefully we feel more comfortable as peers, as colleagues, if we are all equal and we're all working together and all have the same opportunities. If we feel hindered in any way, if we're hesitant to make any to add any input to the collaboration approaches. It might hinder the creative process, which again, we'll talk about later, and so on. But by hopefully looking at parity in this lens of, if we didn't do it, how would that be bad? Hopefully it helps paint a more clear picture as to why parity is so important, why it is important that all members of that team feel equal and feel that they have the same opportunity to collaborate, to present information as their peers. The last key component that we will talk about here is voluntary participation. Voluntary participation, meaning that collaborating with the team you are in is not directed by your supervisor or by anybody else. Heather, Robin, Ann, and I were not told that we needed to work together to better our practices. We met through some connections made through our jobs, and then we took interest in working together to become better at what we do and help each other grow. There is no mandatory requirement for us to work together. Rather, we are collaborating because we recognize that by doing so, it leads to great outcomes. Some of you may be familiar with the grid shown on the screen. It's an example of an assessment that shows student progress. This can be one example of an outcome that can be thought of when participating in collaborative efforts, student progress. I can rattle off other different great outcomes, including new and different shared resources that can come from collaboration. I hope that through this 2.5-hour session, you will be able to walk away with some resources that will benefit your efforts in whatever it is that you are collaborating on. At the end of this session, Heather will be sharing a QR code with you that will invite you to share and collaborate with us, where we have resources that we can share, and then vice versa. If there's something that you would like to share with us or other members of any team, that's kind of what we're looking to hope to accomplish with that. On the screen here is a snapshot of the shared Google Drive that Heather created for us towards the beginning of us working together. I will take a moment to pause and say that through collaborating with Heather and Robin Ann, this piece here of sharing resources via Google Drive, my coaching efforts within the School District of Lancaster have become far more organized from learning from them sharing the information with me on how they organize their resources, notes, feedbacks, etc. in Google. So not necessarily directly related to voluntary participation, but it is because I recognize that by working with them, it has led to a very great outcome for me, which has then led to a great outcome for the teams that I work with, and then it just continues to go. But back to collaboration and voluntary participation, if members are directed to collaborate, the component of parity might get lost. So what does that mean? Teams might not feel like equals, which might result in them feeling frustration, inequality, uselessness, etc. Again, members might feel hesitant to voice their opinions that might be outside of the box, or they might feel weary of making a mistake. They might not fully participate in those collaboration efforts. With that, one side note, when I was researching these key components, I spent a lot of time reflecting on this one, the voluntary participation. I know that I can say that my participation in collaborating with Robin, Ann, and Heather is voluntary. No one has required us to work together, and we have worked and collaborated together as we see fit and as it benefits us directly. However, during this time reflecting on what is voluntary participation and how to incorporate that into collaboration, I kept getting stuck on the thought of voluntary participating in collaboration with my coworkers. The thought kept popping in my head that it's not voluntary. They're my coworkers. I do have to work with them. So how do I incorporate this voluntary participation piece into something that I do have to do for my job? And I don't mean it in a negative connotation. I love my coworkers and I'm happy to work with them, but it's not voluntary. It's not something that we have chose to do. But I did take pause and I said, you know, that piece is true. I do have to work with my coworkers, but what is the voluntary participation is following the steps for effective collaboration. Picking to establish effective collaboration methods with your colleagues, that is voluntary. And that's something that we will go into in this next section here. But so I just wanted to address that because it was nagging me and I just said, yes, we have to work with the coworkers that we have. That's not an option. But in order to make it as effective as possible, that is voluntary. That is an option. And hopefully we would want to take some steps to make it as beneficial as possible. So with that, we have discussed the key components of collaboration. I want to share with you some steps that we have found to be effective when working towards collaborating effectively. I put this visual here because how great would it be to do this at each time that you work together with somebody? You put your hands all in, you say a group chant, and then you say, let's go, or break, and then you go off to accomplish whatever it is that you need to accomplish. But I did pause and think, how many times do we as professionals or anybody get ready to walk into a team meeting or load up the Zoom, and you might be dreading it a little bit. What's on the agenda? What is going to be assigned as a to-do or an action step? What conflict might happen? Any of these possible reasons why we might dread working together. But what if instead we went into these opportunities to work together with the idea that working together would achieve a desired outcome, that if we have developed an interdependence and when working together, it will benefit ourselves, our students, our families, our communities, so that by working together, we are going to accomplish something that we could not accomplish on our own. So when we were discussing how we establish effective collaboration, we came up with a list of, and let me move me here. We came up with a list of 8 different steps towards establishing that effective collaboration. I wanted to tie some sort of visual along with these 8 steps. And so that's why I chose the pie graph. To me, this outlines all 8 steps towards establishing effective collaboration procedures, and highlights that not one step is more important than the other, which is why they're all broken down into equal pieces. While one piece might become more important than another at a set time, so during the time that you're setting goals, that might be more important than assessing effectiveness at that time, and we'll go over everything. So while the value of it can shift in the moment, all 8 pieces are needed to complete the circle. So we can't have collaboration without the complete circle. If one piece is missing, the circle would be incomplete, and that would lead to incomplete collaboration. So it might be a little bit of a cheesy reference, but it's true when talking about collaboration, incorporating all of these steps into it. So we'll get into it. The first step that we'll talk about is establishing relationships. So establishing relationships, they need to be formed and consistently worked on to establish trust in the collaborative process. We cannot just group people together and say, okay, collaborate, let's work together and figure this out. It is important, and as we'll get into other areas of collaboration, it's important to know who you're working with and trust who you're working with. So how do we get to know each other in this professional setting? The first thing that we talked about is what they're passionate about. Why are we here? What are you interested in doing? It can be both related to the topic at hand, and it can also just be in general. It can be in general in your professional life, or it could be a personal passion that you might have that you just want to share. It helps establish relationships. It helps get to know people outside of the little piece that we might know them through. So it just anything that you would want to share is related to that would be helpful in establishing that relationship. Another piece, which I think is crucial, is what are the skills that you have developed related to the topic at hand? What are some things that you are very familiar with and comfortable with, and what do you know how to do? And along with that, how did you learn those skills? How do you learn best? Because one of the parts of collaboration is going to be, we're going to learn something new. We're going to create something new. So if you can share with your colleagues, with your teammates on how you have learned best in the past, that might help them with sharing new information with you. And another component when forming new relationships is addressing different weaknesses that you might have, and keeping it related to the topic at hand is great. It doesn't need to be something that's completely off topic. We're not looking to share things that might make us uncomfortable. But it's important when learning how to build and support someone through different weaknesses. So going back to how I am so thankful that I've worked with Heather and Robin Ann, one of the weaknesses that I have had is the organization of the resources that I have created. And by collaborating with them and by sharing that weakness, then I was able to grow in my own way, and kind of help me fill in that weakness, if you will. So tips on establishing different relationships. Connect with those both within and outside of your program as best and as comfortable as you see fit. Consistently connect is key, and using the tools you have available to work with the relationships consistently. Robin Ann, Heather, and I were connected through colleagues that we work with. Robin Ann and I connected through our local IU, where our TAC, our training, a member of the training and consultation team, Melissa Walsh, has connected all of us as internal coaches. And then Heather and I were connected through consultants through the Autism Initiative. Sorry, just paused there because I had a really big breeze come through. So anyway, Robin Ann and I were connected one way. Heather and I were connected a different way through the Autism Initiative. Heather and I were connected prior to COVID, which meant travel was something we needed to keep in mind, because prior to COVID, most meetings happened in person. And so Heather's district is about an hour from my district, so travel was kept in mind. Robin Ann and I connected during COVID, so Zoom was a regular part of our routines, so we did not have to worry about travel at that point. Now the three of us together consistently Zoom when we're working together. Robin Ann and I haven't seen each other's districts. We've just talked about them and shared about them with each other. And I've only seen Heather's very well organized office, which she'll give a little bit of insight to in her section. However, we consistently use the tools that are available to us. We work on establishing the relationship and maintaining the relationship. We don't go over a month during the school year without connecting and collaborating. And then when we were getting ready to put this presentation together, we were meeting regularly to maintain the relationship and keep it strong, because collaborating on any sort of presentation requires trust in each other and making sure that we're all on the same page. So consistently connecting and working together by using the tools that we have. Another thing that Heather created in our Google Drive was she just made a Google Doc, and it just said, I think it's called Coaches Connecting. And then in it, we just, as we're doing things or adjusting things or adding things to our Google Drive, we would just date it, type in who we were and what changes we were doing, or if we had a question. And it was like a chat room, but we didn't need to all be logged on at the same time. So another way to just use the tools that we have available to make the best of the situation and consistently connect with our team members. I do reflect on this when looking at my role as an internal coach in the school district, when working with different teachers, paraprofessionals, related service providers. I do think it's important to take time and connect with each other, and establish those relationships before attempting to collaborate, because it allows you then to build trust within each other, and it allows for conversations to be had that might not be had if you didn't have an effective, trusting relationship with your teammates. So with that, how might it be harmful if we didn't do it this way? There might be limited trust, limited communication, inaccurate information shared, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't have an effective relationship with the people that you are expected to work with and collaborate with, it's going to be difficult to share something if something doesn't make sense, or if you have a question about something. It can be uncomfortable to have those conversations. So we want to avoid that, and we want to establish those effective relationships so that we can have those conversations and build on what we are trying to accomplish. The next component of establishing effective collaboration is creating shared visions. So with that, we have goal outcomes for students and staff alike. What are we looking to accomplish by collaborating? Why are we here working together? What are we looking to do? And we need to have it be a shared vision. If it's something that I just want to work on for myself, I might work on it in my own way and guide it in however I see fit. But if we're working together, we have a shared vision and we're looking at a shared outcome. I did reflect with this, and sometimes it can be a simple shared vision, a shared outcome of establishing those relationships with each other. I know I've been there. I feel like a lot of people have been there where we just feel like we need to talk to somebody who understands, get the thought out there, get the information out there, and then foster the communication to talk through it, to communicate about something that needs to be problem solved. So it can be as simple as that, or it can be, of course, more complex when you're trying to problem solve specific staff training or specific programming for a specific student, whatever it might be, but we're all working towards something together. So some tips for creating shared visions, and I will touch on this repeatedly throughout the rest of this presentation. First one is establishing those relationships, which will allow for open communication. If we don't have effective established relationships, it's going to be very difficult to communicate about about what our shared visions might be. Then share the why we are here, which will allow the conversation to be led into where we want to go. Why are we here? Where are we starting? Where do we want to go? And then just as importantly, revisit the shared visions consistently. Many times conversations can take us into different directions. This year, we all know how crazy it was with COVID and how we were having so many different conversations about so many things that I don't think many of us saw coming. And so there's a potential to get off track. There's a potential to get sidelined or sidetracked and you're talking about something completely different, but pausing and coming back to the shared vision and the shared reason why we are here will help keep that shared vision a main focus for why we're collaborating and why we are working together. The next component or the next step of establishing effective collaboration is setting goals. So it is something that is not quick and easy, but rather that's something that is consistent and that is for the long term. Setting goals is something that we commonly and very easily do for the students that we work with. It is also something that can be easily overlooked when collaborating as professionals. So if we are looking to work together, if we are looking to achieve a desired common outcome, a shared vision, then setting a goal of what it is that we are looking to accomplish together is going to help drive that collaboration process, those collaborative efforts. So some tips with setting goals, creating and setting goals is assess where we are, assess that baseline. Where are we with performance related to the set goal? Where are we starting and where do we want to go? Then, just as you would for students, create a goal that can be measured to assess if it was achieved or if it was not achieved. This goal can be related to student growth, staff growth, or anything else that might be appropriate. When I came across this component, I did want to share many different examples of how we did this, but I didn't know how to paint a clear enough picture with the amount of time that I had here in this session. But I did want to share and stress that creating a goal for yourself and for what you're looking to accomplish can be a daunting task. But if you keep it as simple as possible and just go about it possibly in the way that you would create a goal for your student, that can help a great deal. Where are you at and where do you want to go? Are you starting at a baseline of 0? Or are you starting at a baseline where you're almost there and you just need to fine tune something to make it as effective as it possibly can be? The next step that we will talk about for establishing effective collaboration is highlighting the different strengths of the team members, as well as the areas of growth for those team members. So through establishing solid relationships, so again, we're coming back to that, that you're working with, you can engage in the conversations. It can require you to be vulnerable, and it engaging in a dialogue of either your strengths or your weaknesses might be a very sensitive situation. Participating in those conversations, though, with peers that you've already established trust and effective communication with can make that a little bit easier for you. But have those conversations with your specific strengths and with your specific areas of growth. I will continue, as I've said, to go back to that establishing effective relationships. It would be a hard task to go and discuss your own or someone else's strengths and needs if a relationship with your teammate was not formed. It would be difficult to go up to somebody that you don't know and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. We've got to figure it out. It can be considered, areas of growth can sometimes be considered an area of weakness, which is not the case at all, but sometimes that can just be the assumption, and people will harbor that feeling and not then want to share that in a collaborative group. But if you've established the relationship, it can make that a little bit easier. You've laid the groundwork for effective and consistent communication, and that will include continuing to address specific areas of growth and specific areas of strength. The next component for establishing effective collaboration is fostering creativity. So when I was putting this part together, I was saying to myself, "Ooh, I think this is the most important thing of the whole session." And "Ooh, if anybody takes anything away, I would love for it to be this." So I'll go into it a little bit. Freedom and flexibility for how the collaborative approach is implemented is a great way to foster creativity when collaborating. So back under the 4 key components of collaboration, we talked about parity and we talked about voluntary participation. If we are all if we're all equals, and if we're all working together because we want to work together to achieve a desired outcome, it allows for that freedom and it allows for that flexibility on how we are going to work together to achieve that desired outcome. If somebody hands a form to you and says, this is how you need to work together to achieve this desired outcome, it could possibly hinder that ability to be creative and flexible with what's going to work best. Again, not to say that there's not a time and place for that, because there absolutely is. But if we have the opportunity to be flexible and we have that freedom to work together as we see fit, as it works best for us, it allows for some creative outcomes and some great problem-solving strategies to be put in place. One of the biggest takeaways that I had while putting together this information was that reflection component, encouraging self and group reflection. Taking the time to pause and reflect on your practices, your efforts towards collaboration, your input towards collaboration, your peers' input towards collaboration, reflecting on the progress you're making towards your goals, reflecting on your shared visions, reflecting on your relationships, constantly thinking about all of the pieces that go into a collaborative approach can help then foster a better collaborative approach. So definitely spending time to make sure that you're reflecting not only as yourself, but as a group. For strengths, pulling in strengths from others to creatively problem solve something. That's really a big piece of why we're here and why we're collaborating. We work together as a team to collaborate, and I want to bring a strength to the situation that I have to then help somebody else. I want to share some information that I have that might help somebody else, or might help us as a team to get to our desired outcome. And then lastly, it might be cliche, but thinking outside of the box to come together and possibly coming up with something great that you might not have on your own. And that goes back to that, the team working together as that team, that interdependence, working together as a team. You can't accomplish it on your own. You're accomplishing it because you're working together. The next one, which I've talked a lot about in and out of the past couple of components, is that share piece, sharing knowledge, sharing resources, sharing insight. You have information that you can offer to share with your team and vice versa. There's no possible way for one person to know all that is needed to know. So there's a quote in an article that I will share at the end that says just that. There is more and more to know in the world, and you can only have so much in your head. So as we continue to go each day, there's something new to learn, and you can only hold so much. So sharing that information, sharing the resources so that it helps others grow and that you can foster your own growth as well through that sharing aspect. One way that we've shared resources, which I did touch on briefly before, is Heather introduced the use of Google Drive to me and highlighted the different ways to share resources between us as the internal coaches. And for us to each share our own resources with our own respective teams within our district. So this is just one way, and I put in the quote, work smarter, not harder, have it organized. This is just a small snapshot of the resources, but working smarter, not harder, sharing what we've created. There's no need to recreate the wheel. If the resource is out there and we have it organized so that we can share it easily, let's do it. We also use the resource disc from Patton's Autism Initiative, which has so many different resources for each area of programming that might be used in the classrooms. And then in a little while, Heather will be touching very briefly on some of the organization setups she has for materials and how she shares them with her teams. And then another way to share resources or gain access to the knowledge or insight that somebody else has is to simply just ask. One of the more recent times that we came together to collaborate on this session, Rob and Ann had asked for information regarding a relatively sensitive topic for one of her students. And with that, just through saying, hey, this is what I'm working through with one of my students. Do you have any information? Do you have any resources on it? She was able to walk away with so many more things that were easily given to her. It's she didn't need to go and dig through all of these different things. The situation was presenting itself at that point in time. She asked, and the resources were there and available for her. So how, if we didn't do it this way, might it be harmful? Team members will get burnt out if constantly having to create their own resources or spend all this time researching for something. If another team member has it available, share it. Create those resource banks so that it helps with that burnout. It helps with keeping us ready to go. And then also just thinking of reflecting on the outcome of collaborating, that two people are working together and something is created. If we're working together to collaborate, then there should be an end result, a final product. And then if we can share this product to benefit others, even better. One of the last components of effective collaboration is assessing effectiveness. As with anything, if you made a goal, you should assess the effectiveness. Did you accomplish what you were looking to accomplish? This was honestly one of the most difficult pieces for me this year, and that I do attribute a lot of it to the pandemic. Life was extremely fast-paced. It is hard to believe that the school year is already over with. So many changing factors in the educational world this year. We were in person for a large amount of the school year, and Heather will share that wasn't the case for her. So everybody was in different stages of trying to work through the school year and get our kids what they need. But a problem would come up that needed to be problem solved, and then possibly the mode of instruction would change, and then the problem would resolve itself, and then something else would happen. And so it led to not always consistently assessing effectiveness because there were so many different changes going on. Not to say that things that we weren't making sure that things were being implemented. It was that when looking at collaboration approaches, we would say, okay, here's how we're going to problem solve this one thing, and then something else would change. So it was definitely something that I struggled with a little bit this year personally. But a wonderful, great thing of this past year is that there were so many learning opportunities as well. And so I think by the end of this past school year, we learned how to work through those different changes and how to then continue to assess were our collaboration approaches effective? Did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish? And if we didn't, how can we change it to make sure that we can get what we're setting out to accomplish? Oops. And then lastly, which again might be overlooked sometimes, is celebrating effectiveness. Celebrate successful collaboration efforts. Share successes of the collaboration efforts with those on your team. How did it work? We got it. We set out and accomplished what we were looking to accomplish. You all worked together to form a community and form different supports. So sharing benefits will be a great celebration. And as far as tips and methods for you to celebrate your success, I have to say that that is up to you. Do whatever works for you and your team. As for Rob and Ann, Heather and I think being able to spend time together, putting this session together, that was quite a celebration for us. It was the collaboration process. The end result was this session, but through working together, I know I learned so much about how Heather prepares presentations, how Rob and Ann prepares presentations. And so that was a great success as well. And I know that once we submit it, we will have a little celebration as well, a little being sure to recognize the efforts and the end results of what we've accomplished. So some final thoughts, and then I'll end with just a little quote. So collaboration final thoughts. When we first started our time together, I did mention how the word collaboration might be considered a buzzword. It might be something that is thrown around and teams might say, oh yes, we collaborated, we did that, no problem. But in reality, my hope is that after listening to this section of the presentation, that you learned that collaboration is hard work. It takes time and it takes effort. It might not come easy to you, or one part of it might come easier to you than another part. However, by putting in the time and the effort, the work is absolutely worth it. You will be left with tangible results that will help foster growth within your students, your program, your district, your community, and yourself. And so last quote to end with here is from an article, the article that I referenced earlier that I will share. I can't imagine school improvement without collaboration. I don't know how you could do that if you don't all collaborate. Why would you think that one person is the keeper of improvements? One person is not going to be the only one who knows how to improve. Let's listen to everybody's ideas and maybe we will improve. And I think that that shares a really important point. I can't imagine working in my job without being part of many different collaborative teams. And I think that it is important to keep that in mind, that if we collaborate together, we achieve so many different outcomes. And for that, something is benefiting, whether it be that peanut butter and chocolate coming together to create a tasty dessert treat, and people are benefiting by eating, or it's through, what we're talking about here, which is collaborating through education so that educational teams are benefiting, that students are growing and making progress. So I thank you all for listening during this part, and I am going to be passing it on to Heather Matlock. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Heather Matlock, and I am the internal coach for the Harrisburg City School District. Now, for almost this entire past school year, my district was fully virtual, and on top of that, spent most of the year working from home. So faced with those circumstances, I had to completely redesign the system for staff training. Now, before I reveal how I did this, I want you to take a moment and reflect upon your current professional development delivery model. What areas could be improved upon? And how could collaborating with others that are within and also outside of your own organization benefit your overall training package? All right, I like to use this analogy of doing a puzzle anytime I'm describing how to start doing something that's fairly complex. So think about the last time that you did a puzzle. Talk yourself through that process. What was the first thing that you did? So you most likely started by just looking at the picture on the box, right? Because you're much more likely to be successful at doing something if you have a clear idea of what it is you're trying to achieve. So now that you have looked at staff training from this view, you're really in the best position to realize that staff training, it's actually not the big picture at all. It's the student outcomes. You're simply just trying to cause this outcome through the independent variable, which is staff training. It's almost like you're trying to enrich the soil and just setting this optimal environment for growth. Okay, so once you've established what it is you're working toward, what's the next thing that you do? You lay out all the pieces and assess what you have. Because starting to provide training without first assessing what training is actually needed would be much just like reaching into the box, pulling out random pieces and putting them together, just hoping that they fit. What does staff need to be able to do? Remember, everything is in relation to student outcomes. And then you're comparing that with what staff are doing now. And the difference is where training needs to occur. There's various methods for assessing training needs. One of the quickest ways would be just to gather this information by surveying staff, asking them where they feel they need training. But I'm going to caution you not to use self-reporting to build your entire professional model, development model. The staff don't always select what's the priority at the time, and it's not always accurate either. Especially in the case with newer staff, they don't necessarily know what it is they're going to need to know. And sometimes even your veteran staff aren't always aware of areas of skill deficiency. So I find procedural fidelity checklists and competency checklists to be really ideal for a few reasons. They help me to identify specific teaching skills that I need to focus the training. And then it also gives me an objective way to measure the training. All right, we have located the corner pieces. We're finding the edges. Now we're beginning to build a framework. This past year, I used a hybrid async model, meaning that most of the training was completed independently, but there were some synchronous components. And I used Google Classroom as a primary platform for the online learning. When I was setting up my Google Classroom, I started by establishing this initial framework, what I was going to build upon. I had to look at what areas do I need to provide staff training. And then before creating any of the content, you want to determine what it is you want to have staff be able to do as a result. So in other words, objectify the training. Put the goal of the training into observable and measurable terms. All right, now it all comes down to how you design and deliver the training. So yes, lectures are probably the easiest, especially in this format. But you know what? They're not very effective. And we simply don't have time to not be effective. So what are some effective methods for training staff? One that I'm going to be talking about is behavior skills training. I attempted to do this as best as possible, but if you're interested in BST, I highly suggest that you look at Dr. Miguel and Puera's NAC 2020 presentation, which I provided below. His work was a huge influence on my practice. It's why I even started doing this in the first place. So it's going to be much better at explaining it than I am right now, but here's a basic overview. So first, the component of BST would be introducing that target skill. You might need to include a brief rationale of why and when staff would use a particular procedure. Then you're also going to go over the steps and operationally define correct performance. All right, so here's the instructional component of a behavior skills training that I did, in which I taught staff how to conduct a preference assessment observation. So I used an add-on called Screencastify to first explain the purpose of the assessments. And then I followed that up with rationale, by concisely going over each step. All right, so next you're going to provide a demonstration of the target skill. And I was able to find a recent case study, one of very few, looked at effective asynchronous training methods. The study found that there actually wasn't much difference between synchronous and asynchronous trainings in terms of competency if the training was designed well. So one of the critical components to that design was that increased the fidelity of the procedures was this addition of videos that demonstrated correct exemplars of a target skill. Another component was modeling, but also with the addition of voiceover instruction or written instructions that flashed across the screen as the procedure was being demonstrated. So if you are interested in reading that full study, I included the QR code to that study below. It's also at the end of the presentation. So here again is that preference assessment observation, basic skills training. And after doing the screencast to introduce the assessment, I shot videos so staff could see what they were going to be doing. So although I took this video, you will see I shot a second video to do the voiceover portion. There's certainly some practical reasons why you would want to do this, aside from it just being rather difficult to accurately run the procedure while you're also trying to accurately describe the procedure. It gives the viewer that same consideration as well. They can focus on one thing at a time. All right, so after the trainee has had a chance to see what it looks like to do the skill, they're then going to have opportunities to practice the skill. This is arguably the most critical of all the steps of a behavior skills training. After all, the practice is the behavior. So it's unfortunate that it's also seemingly the most challenging to complete asynchronously. Yes, theoretically, the trainee could complete the practice on their own, but keep in mind, they're not going to be able to perform that in the classroom without having successful practice. It's really that supervised or guided practice where the trainer can prevent them from making errors or at least correct them as soon as possible. That's going to lead to that quick acquisition of the skill and that overall fidelity. So keeping that in mind, when I was designing the training, I had to think to myself, how am I going to structure the teaching to facilitate mastery? How am I going to prevent errors from occurring? And how am I going to lead staff to engage in quality practice if I can't see or hear any of this practice? So I'm going to give you a moment to think about what you would do. And pause and resume the video whenever you're ready. All right, so here's how I answered that question. At first, I thought about not having the trainees do any of the practice component asynchronously. They would just view the instruction, the introduction and the observe the model, and do the practice separately when they were able to get on Zoom with me. But the more I thought about the logistics of the training, I realized that I wasn't going to have the ability to provide that practice right away. And the antecedents that matter most occur when in time in relation to behavior? They occur immediately. So I started the initial practice by embedding opportunities following the model. So for the practice, I did a little bit more of a gradual release than I would typically do in hopes of further reducing errors. So I had staff first observe me running the procedure and then completing the data sheet. And then I had them follow my lead. And over the course of the video, I was giving them more and more opportunities to respond independently. By the end of the video, they were essentially doing it without prompts. And what led them to being able to do it more and more independently? Well, it was this combination of prompts and the fourth component of a skills training, which is feedback. I'm going to go over feedback in a little bit more depth later on. But for now, I want to make one important point. Performance feedback needs to be included in the training design. So as you're developing the training, from the very start, you need to plan how you're going to give the trainees quality feedback about their performance. And one of the dimensions of feedback quality is that it should be timely. Feedback's most effective when it's delivered close in time in relation to the behavior. But you're probably wondering, how do I give immediate feedback with an asynchronous training? This can be achieved by, of course, providing lots of response opportunities, but then also providing lots of opportunities for the trainees to check their responses. In the video on the right was an example of a time where the trainees' responses was actually a lot of feedback to me. I realized that I needed to go back, provide further instruction and clarification. And then ideally, anytime corrective feedback is given, there also should be another opportunity to practice. All right, so let's review. Name the 4 components of a competency-based training. That's right. If you said the 4 components of competency-based training are introduce, model, practice, and deliver feedback, give yourselves a pat on the back. You got it. You were listening. All right. So after the training, you want to then evaluate the effectiveness and evaluate where further training is needed. Google Forms automates this process very nicely. And it gives you an overall summary as well as individual performance data that's easily converted to a spreadsheet. There's various ways you can do this, but you want to establish a system for maintaining training data so that you can measure the training against student progress. That's how you're really going to know, is my training effective? All right, so my co-presenter, Rob and Ann, went over coaching. So I'm not going to go over that part. I'm going to go over one of the other next steps, which is that you're going to want to use that feedback to guide your next training. What worked? Well, looking back, things that worked for me were, one, breaking down the steps with a focus on procedures, building in lots of opportunities for practice, and a way for staff to get immediate feedback. I also asked staff for some feedback and got some very specific feedback. Staff reported that the video demonstrations and having lots of examples were things that they found helpful. They also stated that that detailed feedback that they got for their response helped them learn. And remember, feedback should be systematic and should somehow always be advancing the learning process. So regardless of the response, the learner should still learn something. All right, now what didn't work? Well, initially, the completion rate was not very high at all. There could have been many reasons for that, but I decided to focus mainly on effort to respond. If you're building a computer-based training, you want to make sure that it's easy for staff to access and interact with the content. So some helpful tips would be coming up with a consistent format and providing clear directions, and then teaching people how to maneuver the content. You also want to build in systems for support, especially if it's new technology. And establish ways that they can ask you questions or receive additional assistance while the learning is taking place. Now, another adjustment that I made happened as a result of collaborating with Rob and Ann and Audrey. So initially, if they're not completing the training, I have to figure out how am I going to increase the completion rate of training. And one area to look at was how often do they have opportunities in their schedule. So identified some optimal times where staff training could occur and put it into the schedule. If it's not scheduled, it's unlikely to happen, right? But then Audrey also had this brilliant idea, which was instead of trying to fit the training into these designated blocks of time that we've scheduled, why don't we look at breaking the training down to fit into the time we have? So that's when I began taking larger trainings and breaking them down into very small pieces that could be started and completed within the time blocks that we had. All right, so Rob and Ann talked about coaching and just looked at BST a little bit. What are some other effective methods for training staff? So self-instruction manuals have been used for a long time. And while research tells us that they're not all that effective on their own in terms of skill acquisition, retention, and generalization, they are in fact effective when included in a training package. There's also ways that we can even increase the effectiveness of the training manual. Things like making it more user-friendly, guiding the reading, embedding questions, competency checks, including supplemental practice activities, and guided notes. So I did all those things. And better yet, just providing the written procedural descriptions from the manual when delivering coaching. All right, to summarize that section, in general, written procedures, manuals or otherwise, they don't seem to be highly effective on their own. So they definitely don't replace coaching or other training methods. But when used in conjunction with those other training methods, it can enhance the overall quality of your training package. So let's stop and look at these training methods for a second and look at them in terms of what the learner has to do. What conclusions can you draw? All right, so some general conclusions here. The more the learner is actively engaged, the more learning that occurs. Computer-based training can still keep trainees actively engaged. And if you're struggling to figure out how to do that, ask yourself, well, how do I engage learners in face-to-face instruction? It might not look all that different. Something else, the more opportunities for practice, the more opportunities there are to learn. So I created this for a new instructor to be able to review and practice the procedure independently between sessions. The fewer errors that occur, the faster the learning. And in many cases this year, the intervention was being delivered by the parent. But good instructional techniques, they apply to all learners. It doesn't matter the learner's age, educational background, or even their role. I thought this was an important takeaway because it emphasizes the fact that we just need to focus on good instructional design and good instructional techniques. Build our training from there. All right, so here's some additional tips for designing and delivering training. Training needs to be well sequenced. So targets must come from known items. So I started my instruction on pairing by quickly reviewing the ABC analysis and some basic principles of reinforcement. And yes, I do go over the top when I'm delivering reinforcement during a training. I'm sure earlier you got a good laugh from that. I make a fool of myself, but there's a good reason for doing it. It's not just to make the training experience more enjoyable for staff. It's if I don't model it during the training, they probably won't do it during the training. And if they don't do it during the training, they probably won't do it when they're working with students. And I know I have a lot here, but I absolutely did not create everything from scratch. In most cases, I was just building off of something that already existed to some extent. There's still a lot of work behind doing it that way. I mean, you don't want to be disseminating training that has content or procedural errors. But one tip that I found helpful was using procedural fidelity checklists to evaluate the quality of the training and also making sure that the overall training is comprehensive enough. If this is what the trainees are going to need to be able to do as a result of the training, then why not build the training from what it is they're going to need to be able to do? I started to use these checklists not just to assess the training needs, evaluate the training effectiveness, but also as a tool for designing the training. And if they were helpful to me, I could also use them to be a helpful tool for teaching. So I have the trainees use these checklists during the training, and it'll help to guide their practice and to be able to give each other feedback. For just about every training that I do, I set up these role-playing activities to be able to give them authentic practice, as well as opportunities to give and receive peer feedback. Now, this activity, much easier to do face-to-face, but there were a lot of positives about remote learning too. For one, I found it easier to provide relevant content for all staff, and also to provide it at the right instructional level. I was able to assign different training to different staff based on what's going to be relevant. And I was able to do this a little bit easier in this format. It was also easier to provide targeted coaching as a result. The more clear data is, the more you're able to make decisions from it, right? So you can see that there's a lot of hidden opportunities to learn in ways that we never really did before. All right, so once skills are developed, you need frequent practice to be able to keep that response fluent. Put a lot of time and effort into staff training, so you need it to pay off. Staff are going to need lots of opportunities to practice skills that were learned in training and receive frequent feedback in order to acquire and maintain a comprehensive scope of skills. So the more organized and efficient you are, the more opportunities you're able to create. You can find ways to really maximize that time you have. All right, so being well organized, that extends to also having your materials available. Effective training involves having people do things. So therefore, you need to have materials for them to do it with. A pro tip I have is to keep a training set of materials if you possibly can. And that way you will always have your materials organized for the skill you're teaching. Remember, less time prepping, more time teaching. More time teaching, more time learning. And this also enables you to train your new staff on what to do with the materials and control the presentation so you can sequence the instruction from easy to hard. All right, so doing staff training is just like any other skill. It takes time to do it well, and to do it well, you can't do it alone. My amazing patent consultants, Ashley Harned and Willow Hosella, shared a lot of resources with me along the way. There's, of course, tons of resources available through patent.net and the Patent Autism Initiative resource file. Resource sharing is certainly a major benefit of collaboration. But for me, the bigger benefit was getting that guidance and the feedback. So if you don't get anything else, take this away. Don't wait until you have perfected a system for staff training to do staff training. Because ironically, the only way to actually achieve the optimal outcome is to start where you are now, take the feedback you get along the way, and make continuous improvements. Well said, B.F. Skinner. You read that quote. I often wonder, where would we be if it weren't for this man's work? But I also wonder, where would we be without this man's work? Mike Miklos, throughout your career, you have shaped the skills of so many individuals. Those skills improved the educational programs for students, work environments for staff, and the lives of everyone those skills reached. Your career may be ending, but the work that you did has made a lasting impact. Thank you for teaching us all how we can continue to make that impact. Imagine if those individuals, or anyone else for that matter, didn't share their knowledge. There'd be no teaching. And if there's no teaching, you wouldn't have learning. Without learning, it'd be impossible to reach the outcome. There's so much that we can teach each other. So I'd like to extend this opportunity to join us in collaboration. Scan the QR code or reach out to one of us through email. Everyone and anyone is welcome. Right. In conclusion, professional development is just like all instruction. It's only truly effective if you actually use the information under the circumstances you need it, and using it somehow improves that circumstance so you continue to use it again over the course of time. So before you go about your day, I want you to reflect upon your learning over the last 2.5 hours. And do the same for every presentation that you sit in. Because you need to be able to put this information into a form so you can use it, put it into action. Thank you for attending today. And more importantly, thank you for the work that you do